And we are live.
Okay, hello everybody. It's very nice to have you here. Uh, have you here in the webinar. My guest today is Julien Simons from Hugging Face. Uh, I think this is the nicest name of the company I've ever seen. And
It's a funny
before
name. It's a funny name.
before I even get into introduction, Julian, how did you come up with that name? Like you're an enterprise open source software provider, and Hugging Face. How did it happen?
Yeah, so the story is something like this. So the company was started in 2016, and by three founders, three French founders, and just like a lot of other companies in 2016, they tried to do chatbots, right? They focused on building chatbots, and they wanted to build a friendly, safe chatbot for teenagers and generally for just a safe, fun chatbot. And they wanted the company name, the company logo, I guess, to reflect that. And so they picked that funny emoji, right? The hugging face emoji. It's just the name of that emoji, and it stuck. People like it. It's very memorable for sure. I guess it looks good on stickers and t-shirts, um, and people instantly recognize it. But you're right. I still need to explain it, especially I guess for enterprise customers, it's not so obvious what this. It doesn't look very enterprisey. It doesn't look very serious. Which is fine. I'm happy. I'm happy not looking too serious. I think we're serious when it comes to what we build, but we don't want to be too serious about it.
Yeah. So that calls for a shout out to entrepreneurs. Don't
Yeah,
overdo it
absolutely.
when it don't overdo it when it comes to logo. Don't overdo it
Yeah,
when it comes to name.
yeah,
When you have the real solution for the real problem and the real customers, then they will
yep,
finally recognize your name, whatever it is.
absolutely. If you do what you like, build great things, and if you have the right product, um, it doesn't matter what the company name is, and it doesn't matter what the logo is. If it solves a real problem, and if it's easy to use, if it fits the market, it doesn't matter what you're called. So don't spend more time on finding product market fit and less time on company names and logos. You can always rebrand anyway if you want.
Yeah, people are afraid of rebranding, but then when you're a small company, it's
Yeah,
just a
it,
few
it
emails to
doesn't matter. And
send.
they did pivot away from chatbots, and I've been in a few startups over time, and many of them actually pivoted quite a few times before finding the right solution and the right market, right? And so it doesn't really matter what you call yourself. Just find a funny name that relates to you early on, and if it sticks, it sticks, and if it doesn't, it doesn't matter.
You can always change.
You
So
can always change.
Julian is an AI expert. He's been working as a CTO and VP of engineering in large scale startups. He was a global technical evangelist for AI and machine learning at Amazon Web Services, and now Julian is helping enterprise customers figure out generative AI and large language model landscape as a chief evangelist in Hugging Face. And I'm Matt Curleto, the founder of Neoteric, where we help companies build and implement AI powered solutions. So, our today discussion is about empowering generative AI models with domain expertise and how to navigate through implementation in a corporate environment. So, just to start a discussion, I have a really interesting question yesterday on LinkedIn from Anina. And Anina asked if there is more need in the future for generalizable large models or specific, perhaps in-house models that are used for different purposes. Also, when should an organization build its own internal models, and when should it use more general models?
That's a good way to get started. A really good question there. So I think generally, I would always start with off-the-shelf models. You know, because let me explain why. Because at the end of the day, no one really cares about AI, right? I certainly don't. You can quote me on that.
I'm
Um,
very happy
it,
that you said that because
yeah,
I'm always the one saying that on AI conferences, and
yeah,
people are bashing me for it. And I always saying like I had this discussion in Atlanta last week. What is AI strategy? And I said there's no such thing.
no, there's
There's a
no such thing.
strategy and there's an eye. There's a strategy. We want to build a house, and there's a hammer, which is a tool to build a
Yeah,
house. This is just a tool.
yeah, absolutely. So it's technology is just a tool to solve business problems, right? And so different folks have a different definition of business. For retailers, it's going to be, yeah, we want to sell products, and for doctors, it's going to be we want to save lives and cure people, and for teachers, it's going to be we want to help kids be successful, etc. So I use business in a very very large sense here. So in a way, you have your business problem to solve, and you want to get to as quickly as possible to the point where you have a first solution to it, and then you want to iterate on that solution and make it better over time. But time to market and time to value is the critical thing. So if you fall in love with technology too much, then you start building cathedrals just for the sake of building them, and instead of focusing on the business problem at hand, right? And trying to get answers for your stakeholders in days or maybe weeks, right? So coming back to models, if you start from pre-trained models, you can start experimenting in minutes, literally in minutes. And it doesn't matter if you use, I would say, open source only on your laptop or local server, or if you use the cloud. We work with lots of cloud companies and build Hugging Face integrations in the cloud. The problem, I guess the goal is always the same, right? The goal is, okay, I've got this business problem. Is AI an interesting angle to solving that problem? What how do I translate my business problem into an AI problem? What am I trying to do really? Am I trying to do question and question answering? Am I trying to do summarization? Am I trying to do content generation? Okay, so how do you frame the problem as an AI problem? And then what are the maybe two, three, four models that are a good fit to start experimenting? And how quickly can I start experimenting? And the answers to all of that should be minutes, right? You should be very impatient when it comes to starting experimenting. No, experimenting shouldn't be a project. Experimenting should be 10 minutes and start learning about the problem. So generally, pre-trained models will help you do that. In some cases, pre-trained models are just also good enough to go to prod directly, right? For example, translation models off the shelf are very, very good. Speech to text models are very, very good. So there's a good chance you'll be able to use that pre-trained model directly and avoid any kind of training, which is great, right? There's no particular fun in training. Training is it takes a bit of time, it takes a bit of energy. You need to prepare data sets. So it's useful and it can increase the business value you get out of the model. But if you can get that business value out of the box, even better, right? Again, if we can, we're all about solving business problems. We're not about writing tons of code and burning tons of GPU hours just for the fun of it. So start with pre-trained models, experiment, measure those models on your data, and decide where to go next. So next could be, okay, it's good enough and I'm deploying it, or it could be, it's promising but it's not great enough. So I want to fine tune it a little more. I want to train it a little more on my own data, right? Adapting it to my domain, and that's not a complicated process, and that generally will increase the, again, the business value and the domain adaptation of that model. And on top of that, for large language models, you may want to do some prompting, just for output control. I don't know if we'll talk about prompting. I can rant about prompting for 2 hours if you're interested, but probably not. Short
I
version is
don't think.
I don't like it much. That's
Uh,
quite an understatement.
I
Um,
have a feeling that in some time we will just turn prompting into coding. There are already a lot of mm, advice on how to build prompts, and they come with the structure of act as, present results as, etc., etc. So
mm,
you can already find out that there are certain key phrases that are being used
yeah,
working with the model on the prompt level. So yeah, I think that prompting is something we will have to get out of the side of end user as much as possible,
yeah. As soon as we can, I
and
think.
as soon as we can.
As soon as we can. And just to finish on I guess that hierarchy of solutions, from using the model as is to fine tuning, then yes, in some rare cases, there's actually it actually makes sense to train your model from scratch, but because you have tons of unique data, and I mean really unique, like unique in your industry. No one else has that because your company is in a unique position in that market. So there could be an interest in doing that. I will say it's a tiny tiny niche of customers. So and 9 times out of 10, I would say 90 times out of 100, maybe even more than that. Every time a customer says, "Oh, we'd like to train our own model from scratch," I guess 10 minutes into the discussion, I convince them it's really not the way forward. And it's definitely not the first thing they should do. The first thing they should do is start with off-the-shelf models, and then maybe at the end of the day, they realize there's an opportunity to train something. But
I
long
think,
story short, start with off-the-shelf models, evaluate them, um, fine-tune them on your own data if you need more domain adaptation, and please, please, please start with the smallest models possible and
yeah,
go up
definitely.
if
I
needed, right?
remember
If
what
you
you
can
said.
use BERT instead of Llama, that's perfect. If you can use Llama 7 billion instead of Llama 13 billion, even better. It's start small, evaluate, and only go up if needed. You will save yourself a ton of time and money and energy by doing that. Don't start with the huge models. They're mostly a waste of time and money and CO2 and generally everything. You will get better performance from smaller models.
Yeah, and I remember what you said in your opening speech in Atlanta. That really stuck with me. That that models are a part of your cost structure. Your
Yes,
unique data is
yes,
where the value is.
yes. Models are expendable. Data sets are an investment. Absolutely. Models are a cost. Data sets are an investment. Models will just cost you money because you have to train them and you have to host them, right? So show me a company that doesn't care about the cost structure. Those companies may exist, but I would suspect they don't. They go out of business pretty quickly, right? Cost management, cost optimization is always important. And one of the reasons why we use those AI solutions is generally for productivity and cost saving and automation, etc. So how could you say we're going to use AI for increased productivity and increased ROI and not care about the cost. It feels to me uh, there's a problem there, right? In your reasoning. So if you're going to use those models, costs should be factored in immediately, right? So you want to minimize the cost of those models, and that means working with the smallest possible models because they will train faster, they will predict faster, you'll get more throughput, you'll spend less on infrastructure to serve the same traffic, right? Um, and on the other hand, if you really want to invest and hire folks and spend more investment, you need to invest in data sets, right? I keep saying the most critical job today is the data engineer, right? It's nothing else. The data engineer is the person who's going to bridge um, from the understanding the business problem to building the data set that you can apply to fine tuning a model for that business problem. And that's where the maximum value comes from. It's not about the model, it's about the quality of the data. And you heard me say, Matt, if you have healthcare data from 30 years ago, it's still good today. And if you build healthcare data sets today, people will probably still use them 30 years from now, and it's the same for financial services, and it's the same for engineering, and it's the same for a lot of businesses out there. So yeah, you should absolutely minimize the cost of models because that's a sunk cost. It's just part of the project you have to spend on the models, okay, but minimize that, and instead, invest more in your data because that's where the value comes from. That's where the dividends come, right? So if you're a value investor, you want to build high quality data because that's where the value comes from.
So there's this question from Deepti, when to use prompting versus fine tuning. But before we get to direct answer, I want to take a little step back
Sure.
because we're talking about uh, generative AI models that we should use as simple as possible. And then we say that some of them we can already get fine tuned, some of them we can fine tune more. Then there's
Hmm.
the matter of prompting. How can we comprehend it a little? So the generative model is what gives you the general understanding of the words you're using, the phrases you're using. It gives you basically the interface to have this very human-like chatbot between you and the model, right?
Yes, exactly. So as I say, the good thing about large language models is that they're extremely creative, and the bad things about large language models is that they're extremely creative. So they help us build a natural language interface um, that anyone can use, and that anyone in the company can use, even if you're not a domain expert. You can just say, you can ask in your own words a business question, and the large language model will, well, it should be able to use its own parameterized knowledge. Okay, so the knowledge that was learned during the training process or potentially the fine tuning process, as well as external sources of truth, the so-called retrieval augmented generation architectures, where you pull data coming from different backends into the generation process and generate a nice factual answer to your question. So that's really what those LLMs are great at. They're
So
great at
like at the
understanding what you're
foundation,
asking.
so at the
Yep.
foundation, the LLM is just like a generic human knowledge with no specialization. So as you would be talking to a, I don't know, like a graduate from high school that doesn't have a
Yeah.
certain
Well, it would be,
specialization,
yeah.
but can
It would be
already
a, yeah.
comprehend a lot.
It would be a graduate from high school who got to read almost every single public page on the web. So,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, so,
Yeah. We all have
and
those
a lot of,
friends. We all
yeah,
have those friends that start with one question to Wikipedia, and then
yeah,
several hours later they're
yeah,
reading about how does the weird animal from under the sea
yeah,
uh,
yeah, right, right.
eat or something.
But the thing is, so a lot of folks, when I say that, they say, well, then that model knows everything, right? because if it's been trained on all of Wikipedia and all of YouTube and all of whatever, then it knows about everything. Well, the answer is no, because a ton of data is private data, right? So if you're asking general purpose questions where you would probably find the answer on, let's say, Wikipedia or Stack Exchange or something like that, then the model is likely to give you a decent answer. But if you're asking a question on how your company is, let's say, what legal clauses in your own customer contracts are are acceptable, or not, etc., etc., or if you're working in life sciences and you're designing new drugs, the context there is completely internal to the company. So I'm hoping that this data is not on Wikipedia, right? It'd be a problem. So company data and company domain knowledge, and company jargon, etc., all that stuff is private, right? And that's the thing. That's the realization you have to come to at some point. Yes, if you're in chemical engineering, you can ask some chemical engineering questions to your vanilla large language model, but can you ask it company specific questions on company specific engineering processes or policies or whatever? Of course not.
And here
It's
is
not
when
going to work.
fine tuning
So you
comes
need
into
to
play.
inject that knowledge from somewhere else. You need to
And
inject that knowledge from somewhere else.
is this the place where fine tuning comes into place?
So fine tuning will help adapt to the domain. It will help the model understand your, I would say, in your own context in a more natural way. Okay, so if you have product names, policy names, etc., etc., it will pick up that data, and it will naturally when I say naturally, it will out of the box, it will generate text that feels more like the text you use inside your company, right? But that doesn't
But
solve
is
everything.
does it only stay with the wording and the phrases and the names, or uh, because my it's sometimes hard to understand the difference between training the model and fine tuning the model.
Mm.
What is the difference here?
So training is the initial training, okay? Which again, you're probably never going to do because Meta or Google or someone else is doing that for you, because it's a huge effort. It's honestly, it's tens of millions of dollars that you have to spend on that to build that initial model from scratch. So it's very likely you're not going to do it. um, what you're going to do is you're going to take that model and experiment with it and realize, yeah, okay, so it's all right for a number of vanilla tasks. Maybe it's okay to extract information from resumes. It's okay to generate marketing content
And in
for
that
for my
case,
conference,
and in
but it's
that
not
case,
okay for my deep domain questions. And this is where I need to fine tune it just a little more to teach it what my internal company knowledge is about.
so when you want these resumes to be read, you would just use prompting
Yeah, you would just use prompting.
to the general
Yeah,
language model.
yeah, that works. That's fine. Because it's cross industry stuff. It's not specific. Like, it's not specific to your particular
Yeah,
company, your
and
particular context.
let's say that I'm an insurer and I want
Hmm.
to let my customers understand better what is and what isn't covered by their
Exactly.
policy.
There you
For
go.
that,
So
I would need to use fine tuning, right? So
so
that the answers that it provides are not based on some general knowledge
yes.
of uh, insurance, but would actually firstly come from the general insurance policy that I have, then
Yep.
from the specific contract that is between me and the insurer, so that I can get a clear answer for the question. Let's say my neighbor has flooded me 2 days ago. I only
Yeah, yeah,
noticed
yeah.
it now. Will you reimburse
Yep.
the restoration?
Exactly. So fine tuning will help again will help the model understand the domain better. It will also help the model understand the tone better, because if your model sounds like a stupid user from Reddit, even if the answer is factually correct, it's probably not what you want the customer to read. So there's an element of tone and just behaving just like a company employee, which the model needs to pick up. So fine tuning will certainly help with that. And then the other thing you want to do is that retrieval augmented generation technique. And if you never heard of it, I mean, literally 2 days ago, I did a YouTube video on a simple retrieval augmented generation architecture. So go and find that video on YouTube. It's pretty. I think it's pretty cool. And here, we have a model, and before we generate the answer, we actually, based on the query, based on the question, we actually go fetch um, relevant content from some data store that we have, and that could be, just plain search. It could be web search. It could be a SQL database. It could be a vector database. Any
So
any
so that
source of
that
truth
that
where
is
you fetch additional data.
that is
and
kind
and
of a
and
third layer, right? So
yeah,
like the
it's next.
data,
Yeah, it's another.
but
Yeah,
the
it's
data.
another
So
element.
so we have
Yeah.
general language model that
Yep.
processes the information, gives the answers, processes prompting, etc. Then we
Hmm.
fine tune the model to get the domain knowledge, to know
Yes.
that it's in insurance, to
Yes.
understand the wording, the context for the insurance, based on my contracts, my wording, etc., etc. But then, in order to reach out to the specific contract that I have with the insurer, we
Hmm.
need this third layer
Yes.
of generative augmented
Retrieval augmented
ret-
generation.
retrieval augmented
RAG.
generation.
RAG. If you want
That's
to,
the
if you
first
want to
time
sound cool,
I've
you got to
heard
call
this
it
term.
RAG. And yeah, and basically you do some kind of semantic search. So you find, document chunks that are that have a similar context and meaning to the query. You pull that into the prompt, and you literally say something like, okay, as a friendly insurance assistant, please answer the following customer question, blah 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 blah, using useful context found in the following documents. Okay. And if your semantic search mechanism works well, then you pulled in the right bits, and the model will generate a better answer. Again, this can give you really fine grained adaptation. And it will also let you use very fresh information, right? Because the you could be ingesting new documents, new policies all the time, all the time. And as soon as they find their way into your search infrastructure, they can be
Can it
discovered
can it
and they
go
can
real
be
time?
used, right?
Can it go real time like
Oh, absolutely.
the
Yeah,
RAG
yeah, yeah,
the
yeah,
RAG
sure.
part? Because we see a few implementations that the goal is to augment a person with generative AI.
Hmm.
So, for instance, listen to the conversation with the between the salesperson and the end customer,
Yep.
and based on how the conversation is going, and based how the historic conversations were going with customers, uh, propose arguments how to
Hmm.
close the deal.
Yeah, yeah, you can do
And
real
that
time.
would be that information from the conversation would go in this RAG
Yep.
layer.
Yeah, why not? Sure. Or financial news, or generally news, like what happened 2 minutes ago, that I mean, like that has a very strong impact on lots of businesses. World news, world events, commodity prices, energy prices, policy changes. The ECB raising rates or lowering rates. This can have a very strong impact on your decision making process. So if you're able to ingest those events and take them into account, within minutes, let's say, well, maybe faster if you have to, then yeah, they will influence they will influence the decision making process. Really coming back to that demo I built. I'm actually showing an example where I'm asking. So I'm using a good model, and I'm asking it, hey, what's the latest trend on coal investments in China? I think my question is, right? And the base model tells me, oh, coal investments in China are decreasing and blah, blah, blah. Because in 2020, they did decrease. And that's the latest information it had. Okay. I guess because COVID kind of stopped everything. But in fact, if you look at the latest trend, it's increasing. So I'm ingesting some documents from the International Energy Agency, a few PDFs, and factoring them into my RAG architecture. And then I'm asking the question again, and then I get a really good answer saying, well, in 2022, coal investments in China went up by X%, blah blah blah, right? So again, if you use the vanilla model, you would get something that's factually correct, but it could be 2 years old. you know
But is
and
there
if you
is
use
there
RAG, you will get something that's super fresh, and in fact you would take a completely different decision.
and moreover you can use proprietary data for that, so
Absolutely, of course,
you
yes.
used some more up-to-date general knowledge in those
Absolutely,
PDFs, but maybe I have work of my own analysts or
exactly,
some
yeah,
data
yeah.
I bought about
News
how
feeds,
many
whatever.
coal trucks and coal trains are moving in China.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So that's the it's and it's a layer. It's really, you start from the base model, and you should always start from there and evaluate that. And then uh, you can do some prompting for output control, and tone control and brevity control, etc. And then fine tuning will add, I would say, general domain adaptation, let's say to the insurance industry and to your own flavor of insurance products. And then on top of that, you have the very fresh, very granular information, and RAG is a good way to add that to the mix. And so these architectures are really standardizing now. I love it when I meet customers who tell me, "Oh, I use a typical RAG architecture," you know, and I'm laughing internally because 3 months ago, 4 months ago, no one was really doing that. So,
No, I was
you know,
talking
three
about
months
that.
from now. 3 months from now, they will say, "Oh, I have a legacy RAG architecture." That's how fast that stuff is moving.
Yeah, yeah. So, Julian, we use this insurance company as an example, and I think it's quite easily comprehensible by everyone. So, if we were to create this ask your insurer bot for the end customer so that she understands when she will be reimbursed or when she will not, or when does she have to pay higher installment or whatever. So what would be the first steps to do it? As I understand your advice, it would be to start with some generative AI model, uh, even the open AI model or some open source model, and start prompting it
Yes.
to see what kind of answers do I get, right?
Yes, I think it's a good way. Start simple, start small. So take maybe 2 3 of the best small LLMs today, and maybe Llama 2 7 billion, and Mistral 7 billion. And actually Hugging Face released one just a few days ago. It's called Zephyr 7 billion. It's a variant of Mistral fine-tuned with reinforcement learning, and it's quite interesting. So start with those. Ask your questions. Do some prompting, and my gut feeling is one of those models will feel more natural. It will generate answers that feel better than the other two.
But at this time,
Why?
I'm not
Why? I
using.
don't know. I don't care.
But at
One
this
of them
time,
will certainly sound, or read, I should say, a little better, and that's the one you should keep building on, because if out of the box it's closer to what you expect, then it's a better starting point. And
but
then the
it's
next step would be adding RAG on top of that, right?
Yeah, that
Adding
was my
RAG,
question because
yeah,
unless I add RAG, so my contracts, my policies, the contract with the customers,
yes,
the previous cases that we were solving, did we reimburse, did we not, did
yes,
we lose the case, did we
yeah.
win,
You need
etc.
RAG for that. You need
I
RAG
need
for that.
RAG for that.
Yeah,
I need
and
RAG
so
for that.
you can
And
get you can get
when,
a
where
ton
would,
of value from that if you
and
use
where
yeah, go
would
ahead.
the fine tuning go in this process? So
If
I have this
Yeah,
general language model. It starts answering questions in a way that I feel it's okay, but it's not the right answers because it
yeah,
doesn't have the RAG part in it yet.
yeah, yeah.
How do I
Now
know if I have to fine tune the model first or put the RAG part in
try RAG
already?
first. I would, if I have to pick, if I have to be prescriptive here, I don't like to use the word always or never because
Me neither.
they never. I mean, everything is gray in my world. Everything is gray, and the older you get, the grayer it gets. Okay, generally, technically, and in life. That's my wisdom for today. So having said that, I would prefer to start with RAG because um, it will give you domain adaptation and freshness, right? And you want fresh answers. You can't live just with the parameterized knowledge, and you can get a lot of value from a small quality LLM, um, and RAG. You can certainly go pretty far with this. Now, if you test that solution, and if you still don't like, and you do some prompting, right, for output control, but if you still don't like the tone, or if you still don't like, if it doesn't sound like an answer that would come from one of your human experts, it might be factually correct. Okay, it could be factually correct, but the tone is not right. It's not deep enough. There are some slight inconsistencies, like key concepts that should be mentioned are not mentioned, or they're mentioned but slightly wrong, etc. Then you probably need to fine tune, right? You probably need to show a few thousand documents to your model, so that and when I say documents, I mean prompts and answers, right? Golden answers, so that it learns how it should answer those questions, according to company tone, company policy. But again, that's the later step, right? I see plenty of customers who don't fine tune at all. They just use a quality LLM, a good RAG architecture with a good semantic search mechanism, and they can already get good business value out of that. It's already better than anything else they have.
So, can you give Asaf Weinberg is asking, can you go through a specific example of when you would choose fine tuning over RAG, and what kind of data would you use to
Mhm.
fine tune the model?
So I would implement RAG first, like I said, and then fine tune for deeper domain adaptation and deeper tone adaptation if I was not satisfied with the previous step. Okay, so you don't have to fine tune, and if you can get away without fine tuning, perfect. How much data do you need to fine tune is a good question. There's a good research paper from Meta, which is called Lima, which means less is more for alignment, meaning domain alignment. So I would encourage everybody to read this one, the Lima paper from Meta, easy to find, and it shows that what matters more than everything else is the quality of the data, of the fine tuning data, not the quantity. In fact, they show that if they fine tune Llama, so it's Llama v1, but I guess we can extrapolate that to more recent models. They show that fine-tuning Llama 1 on 1,000 prompts is enough to outperform models that have been trained on much more data and much fancier techniques, including reinforcement learning with human feedback, etc. So I see customers who are successful with just a few hundred prompts and answers, but you need to be very, very careful on the quality of those, and curate them, and literally write them yourself, or if you're going to generate them, or at least review them, and go comb through them, and decide if the golden answer is really what the data set includes. It's you cannot understate how important it is, to have quality data. Overstate, sorry. It's critical. It's where the value comes from. It's not so much about the model, like we said before. You'll use this model today, you'll use that model 3 months from now, and yet another one 6 months from now. Okay, but the quality of the data is what will make those model iterations great, right? That's the value will come from that. So a bit of super high quality data goes a long way. And yeah, go read the Lima paper if you need more background on that.
So the three steps for now would be: first, experiment with prompting on general model,
Yes,
then use RAG architecture to put your proprietary information,
and
and
freshness. Yeah, and freshness.
the third step would be fine tuning for a better tone, but this is more about how it's said than what is said, right?
Yeah, it's gonna pick up. It's gonna pick up. Like again, it's both. It will pick up tone, and it will pick up domain knowledge as well. Um, and both may be important, but that can only be figured out through experimentation, and like fine tuning by default. I don't think is it's a great idea. If it's not broken, don't fix it. If you get good quality generation out of the box, and prompting is enough to give you what you want, and RAG is enough to give you internal data and fresh data, then fine, right? Then fine.
So when would I actually go to Hugging Face and search for a fine-tuned model to start with? Because we were talking right now about kind of the custom approach where
Mhm.
we do everything on our own, but there's a huge library of
Yeah,
pre-trained models and fine-tuned models provided by Hugging Face. When is the right moment to dig into that?
always. You should always start from a pre-trained model on Hugging Face. That's your starting point. So just go to the Hugging Face hub, look for filter models on task types, and do you want to do summarization, do you want to do, I don't know, image generation, or do you want to do text generation with chatbots, etc. Filter on languages, filter on open source licenses, and you will get your short list, honestly. And also obviously for LLMs, we've built this super popular LLM leaderboard where the community submits their models constantly, and they get scored on benchmarks. So you can see which one is the best at the moment, and you can see which 7 billion model parameter is the best, etc., etc. So the leaderboard is a good tool to identify models, and then again, like we said, start experimenting from there. um, See what natural behavior you get out of the model, how far you can go with prompting, and then start adding RAG again for fresh company data, and take it from there. And keep testing, identify what works, what doesn't work, and what's a good way to improve on that. It's a super iterative process.
So would it be fair if I said that implementing generative AI today is basically an R&D project?
I don't know about R&D. It's less code than you think. right? And until you start fine tuning, um, I would say you don't need any machine learning skills to do it. If you look, if you look at a simple architecture with, pre-trained models, a bit of prompting, and some RAG stuff on top of it, um, I wouldn't call it machine learning, honestly. I think it's software engineering, right? It's integrating building blocks and figuring out how those things work, and you have really nice open source frameworks, like obviously Hugging Face, that make things very simple, and LangChain, which is very popular, that makes it very simple to assemble all those building blocks and start getting work done, right? So it's until you start building data sets and training, I don't think you need machine learning skills. So I don't know if it's R&D. It's, to me, it's application development, and if you're a
Uh, I
developer, you
meant
you can get it done.
R&D. I meant R&D as a process of proving value or
Oh, sure. Yeah.
failure
Well, yeah, yeah.
as fast as
Mhm,
possible.
okay.
So when we work with our customers, we see them in usually one of three stages. They either just know that generative AI is a transformative technology and they have no idea what are
Hmm.
the applications for them. Then they have thousands of ideas and don't know
Yeah.
what to start with.
Yeah.
And then they have this one idea that they would like to develop, but when they started gathering information about how people imagine it looking like and
Mm,
working, it ends up bigger and bigger, and then they are like, we need 2 years just to make a prototype.
no way. No
No
way.
way.
Or
No way.
if that's
So
your customer, run away, find another customer.
no, no, that's not my
Um,
customer, fortunately.
Seriously.
What we do is we shorten this time, so we try to build a hypothesis
Yeah.
of, if we use this kind of data with this kind of model, we will be able to improve this kind of
Yeah.
metrics
Yes.
because this will be the new user experience flow. And
Yeah. Yeah.
how long do you think it should take for like an initial proof of concept, since the beginning of the conversation of what we want to do to the moment where you can actually see the results on some mocked data or old data or whatever?
48 hours,
48 hours.
days, 3 days, 4 days.
Okay, that's nice.
Seriously, it's what do you need? You need to find an LLM. Okay, so you'll spend maybe an afternoon experimenting on 2 3 LLMs with customer data to see customer prompts, to see which one sounds better or reads better, because they don't speak yet. Um, and then you need to quickly build some kind of backend for your RAG data. Again, if you can start small. You don't need the fancy vector database. You can use Postgres. You can use Elasticsearch. You can use OpenSearch. You can use, like, very very simple things that are available um, at the drop of a hat. You need to ingest some data. That's not a problem. If you use LangChain has, I don't know, tens of different connectors, and for all kinds of data, from emails to PDFs to everything, really. And then you need to start putting things together, and honestly, it's in a few days, right? Once you have some customer data to play with, in a few days you can show them a quick prototype, and you build a simple UI on top of that, and it doesn't have to look super fancy. It's just going to be a chatbot page, right? So you can use Trimlet, you can use Gradio, you can use very simple stuff. So yeah, if I mean, that's the target you should have, right? You should be able to, once you get some customer data, you should be able to show them a first version in 2 or 3 days. There's no reason to spend more, right? There's no reason to spend more. And because also you want feedback, right? You want to show them what you're building. You want them to react to that. You want them to give you more ideas. You want them to try more prompts. And then you can, because then you get real customer feedback and you can iterate on that. And for too long machine learning has been like a tunnel thing. And I mean, I worked in some companies where like even the small machine learning project was 6 months. It's like, what the hell? uh, it's there's no reason to do that anymore. The overall project could last 6 months, because you're collecting data and you're iterating and you're fine tuning and you're running A/B tests, and you want to have enough data to come to meaningful conclusions,
Yeah,
etc.
then eventually you want it to
But
be a part of one interface with your
yeah,
salespeople, for instance.
yeah.
Would it be fair if I said that the generative AI part of generative AI project is not the biggest cost structure when it comes to building the solution?
Well, it's the model itself, right? I mean, or even the RAG architecture will just be one part. Obviously, it needs to integrate with the other systems in the platform, and it needs to be integrated um, in the IT platform, in the business apps, etc. So, sure, I'm pretty sure you'll waste more time with that than actually building the building the solution. The speed at which you can build now, with Hugging Face models and cloud services, and again, open source frameworks, like I mentioned LangChain, but Llama Index is also very interesting if you never looked at it. um, the speed at which you can build this is insane. And even for me, and I'm old and I'm slow and I'm you know it's hard for me to sit in front of my computer for more than a day because I'm flying around everywhere. But I still get stuff done, and so imagine what you can do if you're not flying around, if you have a brain that's 30 years younger than mine, etc., etc. You can go at light speed today. And so don't let anybody else tell you this is a 6-month project. Go and try it. Go and try it. You'll see how far you can take this in just maybe 3-4 days. It's crazy. And it keeps accelerating, and the quality of that you get even out of the first iteration is great. So yeah, it's the time to build for everyone. And it's not machine learning. Don't let anybody tell you it's machine learning. It's only going to be learning. It's only going to be machine learning if the model is learning, right? And that means training and fine tuning. So if you're just building with off the shelf models, you're not doing machine learning, and that's good news because it means every developer out there can do it.
That's a really really interesting what you're saying, and I wanted to touch base on one more thing
Sure.
because I get a lot of questions from enterprise customers where they don't really understand how they can use fine-tuned models and then this RAG architecture in a way that it goes on with their compliance. So maybe you can share what
Sure.
are the challenges that enterprises have using Hugging Face that a startup or a small company would not have.
That's a good point. So cost is always important, and compliance and privacy, I guess, equally important. And in fact, a lot of enterprise customers come to us to help them solve that, because sure, they build POCs using third-party APIs from model providers, and that's great. Experimenting is fine, and it shouldn't be restricted. But then when the time comes to move to prod, then you have to tick all the boxes on security and privacy and compliance. And regardless of whether you trust those third party models, regardless of what the privacy policy says or doesn't say, you know, it will always be safer to self host your and model endpoints under your own administrative control. So if you're running in the cloud and you deploy models inside your VPC, that will by design be more safe and more compliant than calling a third party API hosted everywhere else, right? That's it. You will never convince a compliance officer that it's safer to call a third party API. By design it's not. You know, Even if that provider does the right thing, there is still more risk of doing that. So Hugging Face models are actually the safest option and the most compliant option, because you can just self-host them on AWS or Azure or whatever you're using, or maybe on-prem if you have to do on-prem, and that's under your control. And you have full administrative privileges there, so you decide who gets access to what, and you implement your own security and your own auditing and all that good stuff. And you can apply exactly the same security measures to your models that you're applying to everything else inside your platform, right? So there's no AI exception. When it
But
comes to security, it should be
Julian,
as safe as everything else.
if I can jump into that, because I see a little bit of an AI exception here, uh, meaning you generate stuff
Hmm.
and you take the liability for what you generated.
Oh yeah,
Let's use
okay, sure, that's a different risk. Yep.
let's use an extreme example. In the
Hmm.
very early days of Mid Journey, there were people trying to use it to generate child porn.
Hmm.
Of course, there was no child involved.
Hmm.
Most probably, it wasn't even a crime, but
Hmm.
you still don't want to be associated with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So you not only need to consider compliance as in IT security, data
Sure.
privacy, and what comes into the model, but you also have to consider what comes out of the model. And
Absolutely.
how do you comply with that?
I would argue that open source models and open source data sets and published papers are more transparent and easier to check than black box APIs and black box models and black box training sets.
But
And
would
in
you
fact,
would you use some kind of reward mechanism that automatically fine tunes the model so that it gives you better answers, more reliable answers, or how would you make sure that whatever goes out is not hurting the end user?
so you'll never be sure. The the only sure things are death and taxes, as we
Yeah,
know, and there's no such thing as 100% accuracy on anything. And when I meet with C-level folks who say, "Oh, I'm not going to build AI until it's 100% accurate," I ask them, "Okay, what's your human baseline, right? Your customer support agents, are they 100% correct every time? Your salespersons, are they 100% correct all the time?" And the point is, they don't know. Humans are not perfect, and models will never be perfect.
yeah,
But
that's
having
the
said
very
that,
important. But that's the very important thing
yeah,
to know what you aim for,
yeah,
because maybe solving 80% of the cases is good enough.
yeah, yeah. And for some task types, there are some baselines, and we can compare the benchmark results to those human baselines, and that's interesting. But again, when it comes to generating the wrong thing, there's I think the better starting point is high quality public data sets that have been curated and that have been documented in research papers and that are shared with the community and are under public scrutiny. Honestly, it is a similar problem to open source security, right? I'm still meeting executives who tell me, "Oh, we're not going to do open source because it's less secure than commercial software." It makes me want to scream when I hear that in 2023. We've had so many examples of the contrary, right? We've
Of
had so
course,
many
like
examples of
it's
open source
what is
being the
what
most
is
secure
safer?
option, you
What
know?
is safer, a proven great log or a random log that
Yeah.
some like no one tested?
Yeah. So again, there are vulnerabilities in open source software, but there are constantly scrutinized, and they're fixed in record time when they're discovered. And we know for a fact that it's not the case with commercial software, right? So it's the same for models. It's the same for data sets. There are some problems with both, but they're identified, they're studied in the open, and they're fixed or mitigated in the open. And so we know what we're working with. And I
So
was going to say, um, Stanford University published a study in last June, where they compare model providers with respect to the upcoming EU AI Act, right? So the AI regulation in Europe, and it's still a draft, so it's a moving target, and it's not a definitive judgment call here. Um, and Hugging Face came up first. Go and find that page. Look for Stanford EU AI Act report. You'll find it. Hugging Face is number one. And okay, well, we're happy of that, but we're not bragging, because the reason why we come first is because, again, open source by design is just more transparent, and it's easier to inspect, it's easier to understand. And so when it comes to regulation and explainability and ethics, etc., and bias mitigation and so on, um, it will be easier to deal with those issues with open source documented models than with closed source black box models. Just by design. Um, so that's where we stand, and that's why we keep pushing for more transparency, more documentation, more openness, because we know it will help the community figure out issues and fix them.
So, wrapping up our discussion, what we've learned today is that the starting point is general language models, and as simple as possible, just
Yes.
to get a taste of what's possible, what's going on, how the
Simple
problem
always
works,
simple always wins.
what are the answers. And then the next step is to add your own proprietary data as RAG to get
Yes.
the freshness, and also to get the answers based on your proprietary data, just as we use this insurer as an example. And the third step, if you want to improve it further, the way it speaks, you can fine tune the model,
Mhm.
uh, or get a fine tuned model out of Hugging Face. And finally, there's nothing like 100% accuracy, so there's always a risk of something going sideways,
Yes.
and the risk is
But
lower.
it's life, right? Life goes
Yeah,
sideways. It's
yeah.
We live in times, again, maybe it's the old guy speaking, but we live in times where we can't tolerate any risk. Um, so uh, life is a risk. Breathing is a risk. Deal with it. Deal with it. Life is a risk. Technology is a risk. Everything is a risk. But the worst risk is not making any progress, and just sitting on your ass and complaining that everything out there is scary and not doing anything. It's not how we're going to fix this world, if we can fix it. God knows it's messed up right now, but yeah, we have to take chances, we have to innovate, we have to keep moving, and we have to keep learning. And yes, we'll do some mistakes along the way, but we need to keep moving, and there's no such thing as zero risk. It's a
To
stupid
think
way
about
to
it.
to behave, I think.
Okay, Julian, thank you, and thank you everyone for watching us.
Sure, thanks everybody, my pleasure.
Again, if you have any questions, you'd like to have a follow up discussion with someone on my team about implementing the generative AI use case, feel free to reach out to us for a free consultation that we offer to anyone that's on today's webinar. So thank you again once more, and see you next time.
Thank you very much.